But I mean, we've got 400. I've grown the YouTube. I've sort of put my efforts into the YouTube channel to sort of grow that. But anyway, but those little provisos, you know. Look, this probably won't take very long anyway, but here we go. So, the idea, sorry about the cables, by the way. No, this is the book I came across after browsing. Well, I spent an unhealthy amount of time on YouTube, watching things, and I came upon an interview with a guy from Psychic News called Roy Stemman. And he was talking about this amazing case of reincarnation and healing, which involved a man called George Chapman and a deceased doctor called William Lang. And anyways, when George Chapman has since died, but at the time he wrote a book with Roy Stemman, the journalist for Psychic Times. It's called Surging from Another World, and it was first published in 1978 when George was at the height of his powers, but it has been updated 2017, and you'll see why. But basically it's one of the most impressive proofs of survival after death that, well, I've read of anyway. I mean, you may know others. I mean, there are many others, aren't there? But this is very impressive. And furthermore, it's a very unusual healing partnership, because you've got two deceased. You've got a father and son who are deceased. They're two doctors, and you've got a father and son on Earth, one of which is now deceased. So this very odd union, and it's been, I don't know, it must be going together. It must have been going on for maybe 80 years of healing, or something like that, I would guess. Which is quite remarkable, I think. So this is the Roy Stemman. He works for Psychic News. Okay, and he got to know this George Chapman quite well, and. Well, he's a sort of bit player in this. He just is one of the authors of the book. He's not such an important part of the book, really. But this chap here is the key player. This is George Chapman. George Chapman was born in Liverpool, quite poor upbringing. Lost his mother early on, brought up by his grandparents. Basic sort of schooling, this is just before the war, Second World War. Basic school. He left school, did a series of odd jobs, became like an odd job man, including became a boxer at one point. And I think probably what saved him a bit was sort of during the war started, he joined the RAF. And he was basically, I think he trained as a sort of commando, he was tracing self-defense tactics to soldiers and things. So anyway, he had this wartime experience. He came out of the army and got married, and then he became a fireman in Aylesbury, Buckinghamshire. Now, there weren't many fires in Aylesbury, apparently. It was quite quiet. So what they used to do, what the chaps used to do, at least a couple of them, was they used to play with Ouija boards in the fire station. And that sort of pricked George's interest in the subject. So, and they made contact. He managed to make contact with his deceased mother. And also, something else had happened while he was a fireman, in that him and his wife Margaret, they had a daughter who died very early on. I don't know if it's just after birth, shortly after her birth, I think. So I think he's quite keen on trying to contact her, see if there's any, he was very interested in this concept of life after death. And what he used to do, him and Margaret would try, they play with the Ouija board at home. And another thing he used to do is he used to sit in front of a mirror and he'd practice, he'd practice going, I think he'd probably practice trying to communicate with the dead, but he got this ability to drop into sort of a trance. and he could communicate with the deceased, and he used to communicate with his mother that way. So this ability to fall into trance was quite important, as you'll see. So there we are. He's going to trance, and he's making contact with the spirit world, receiving messages, and one spirit in particular comes through, and it's a chap called William Lang. And William Lang was a surgeon, from a Victorian era surgeon, worked in Middlesex Hospital in London, and then as a general surgeon. Then he became specialised as an ophthalmic surgeon in Moorfields. Very well respected gentleman, well liked, and he contacted George Chapman in the trance, and he started to form a partnership with George where he could offer healing using George as a sort of intermediary. So I'll just cover anything here. William Lang, there we go. Okay. So he's formed this relationship with George Chapman. Now, a couple of other things about William Lang. I'm skipping around a little bit, but he had a son called Basil and a daughter called Lyndon, and they're quite important to the story. So I just wanted to mention them. But anyway, according to when George Chapman went into a trance, William Lang possessed his body, and he could talk through George's body. So his mannerisms, George's mannerisms would change. George could walk around, he could move, when you say he's in a trance. He's capable of moving around and operating normally, but his whole persona would change, and he'd talk like a sort of Victorian gentleman, and he had knowledge of things which he wouldn't normally have had knowledge of. So it was becoming apparent that he wasn't impersonating anybody. He was actually being taken over by the spirit, by William Lang. Okay. Apparently, according to William Lang, when he was deceased, he went into the spirit world, and there he continued to work with patients in the spirit world. So apparently there's spirit hospitals and whatever, and he was informed by whatever that he had a mission still on Earth to go back and use George Chapman as a conduit for his healing. So, and there was another reason for that, is that apparently George and William had sort of overlapped in previous lives. So it's a sort of previous life thing coming in here. So they sort of were aware of each other. Okay. Anyway. So George is working in a trance up to 6 hours at a time without a break, right? In his small family home in Aylesbury, very cramped home, 2 kids around. And in that time he may be seeing, maybe 40 patients a day coming through. So people come to see him. Now, and what would happen is they'd have a short discussion. George would go into trance, then William Lang would take over George's body, and then William Lang would see each patient one after another. And what he'd do is he'd do spoot operations on what they call the etheric body of the patient. So what the idea being that you've got the physical body, and this is according to Lang, by the way. This is in the book. But you've got the spirit, you've got the physical body, you've got the spirit body, and it's mediated by the etheric body, the two mediated. That's the idea. So if you've got a problem in the physical body, it shows up in the spiritual body. And, and they're two are intimately connected. Although the spirit body doesn't have any form, but it uses the physical body to take on form. Anyway, so, but if you operate on the spirit body, via the etheric body, it has a transformation effect on the physical body. Okay, so the idea was so William Lang would have the patient there, and he'd perform operations on the spirit body. Now he wouldn't be doing it on his own. He'd have a team with him, a team of other doctors, people who he'd probably known in his career, who deceased. And they do these operations. Now, as I say, there he would operate on, babies, children, animals. So it wasn't there wasn't sort of a faith-based part to this. It was something else. It was definitely something bigger than that. So there we are. That's just a recap of what I've been trying to tell you about the spirit operations. So what he'd do, he'd move the spirit body away from the physical body for a while, then he'd operate on that. And apparently it was a very theatrical thing. And what he'd do, he'd snap his fingers like this. And that would be like a message to his colleagues to hand him a different spirit tool, some virtual tool to do the operation with. So, and apparently, so it was quite theatrical. and after the operation, George would have no recollection of this at all. It'd be, for him, it'd just be like falling asleep. He'd have dreams, but he wouldn't have any recollection of. So it's all between the spirit body of Dr. Lang and the patients. So they set up the clinic in Aylesbury, and then for 25 years it just worked out. And he was, at the same time, he was still working as a fireman. So because he wasn't making much money out of healing, he charged people a nominal amount to be healed, or nothing at all if they couldn't afford it. And then he was working as a fireman. But people were coming from abroad because people started to write books about his work, you see. So his fame was spreading out. Although he didn't court any fame, but that's what was happening. It wasn't after that. So people would come over, and they realised that he needed to set up clinics abroad. So he set up one in Paris, I believe, as well as one in Birmingham and stuff. But he would travel to different countries to help people. So his fame was spreading. Now, part of the reason that he could do all this was because his daughter, Lyndon Lang, got to find out that her dad was using George Chapman as a conduit, you see, for his work. So she didn't like the sound of this. She wasn't but she thought she'd better go and investigate it. So she was invited to a session with William Lang. So George went into trance, William possessed his body, and she had a long conversation with her deceased father, you see. Now, when she did that, her father had been dead for 10 years. Okay, but after the meeting, she was completely convinced that the spirit of William Lang, her father, was inside George Chapman. So she confirmed, the situation, if you like. The first good confirmation that it was really William Lang. And then, and the family was of some sort of means, financially. So she helped George. So she gave him money to move to a bigger property, so he could have a proper consulting room. And not only that, but she organised these weird meetings between where she did down somewhere in London, where every 2 weeks George would go to London, have a meeting with a group of doctors, who'd known William Lang and then who'd known his son, Basil Lang, who was also a doctor. So they'd sit around, George would go into a trance, and the doctors would have conversations with William Lang. And sometimes they'd bring patients along as well. So and this went on for many years, actually. There's many years. Until actually they literally all died off, and Lyndon Lang, the daughter, was the only one left. And then she finally died, and after she died, George was able to tell the story, because until that point, Lyndon and the doctors wanted complete secrecy, you see. But when she died, the lid was lifted, and they could tell the story for real. Okay. So that was another curious part of it. Now, the other figure in this story is Basil Lang, the son of William Lang. Now, he predeceased his father. That's one thing. But he also had a daughter who now the daughter was born after Basil died, a few months after Basil died, so they never met. But she also got to find out about William Lang, who she'd known as a young girl, because he was around, and she got to know him quite well, his grandfather Lang, you know. And so again, she got to hear about it, and she went to investigate, and she talked to William Lang, and she came away thinking, yeah, I'm completely convinced of the authenticity of William Lang inside George Chapman's body. So that's the second confirmation. And then they're all, I mean, you know, they're talking about intimate family details here, so it's you know, it seems fairly rock solid to me, but there you go. Now, there's a commentary here to what she said. I don't know whether you'll be able to hear this. I'll give it a go. I think it'll work. No, it didn't work. No, let's try that. Okay, now forget that. That's not working. I'll go on to the next one. Anyway, so Basil Lang there. He's also deceased. So you've got father and son, two doctors, both deceased. And at the moment, you've got George Chapman and his son, Michael Chapman, both alive on Earth, right? Now, Michael Chapman, son of George, he's from an early age, he's working closely with his father, with the patients. But his technique's different. He doesn't go into trance. He does this, what you might call traditional healing, where it's hands-on. You don't touch the patient. You just. So I suppose, I mean, it's not mentioned in the book, but I suppose he's also doing spirit healing. I suppose he's working with the etheric body in some way, I imagine. So he's healing hands-on, no trance. Now he's got a practice in I can't never pronounce this, Machynlleth in mid Wales, right? And he's practicing today. Again, he's got practice there. I think he travels widely as well. Now, but I've actually had dealings with him, so which was a particular part of this interest in this book, because my son had what we think was like a long COVID condition, where he for 6 months he just lost all his energy, just disappeared, right? I mean, for a 12-year-old, that's a bit unusual. So, having read the book, I thought, you know, I don't think traditional medicines can do anything in this case, but maybe William Lang can. So and Michael Chapman. So I contacted him, and he likes the communication to be through letters. So you write letters. I suppose there's sort of like they form a better connection, I suppose, with the person. I don't know. And he likes, so every couple of weeks you write a letter to him to say how the patient's doing, and Michael will do remote healing from this place in Wales where he lives. And in my case, my son's case rather, within about a month he was coming out of this low energy state, it was starting to recover. I mean, okay, could have been coincidence. I like to think it's not. I think it's, you know, the work of William Lang, George Chapman, and Basil Lang. You know, but again, I've personally got another problem with my shoulder at the moment, which is another chronic condition, and I'm in the process of talking to Michael Chapman about that. So I'm going to go back for more healing. But the whole process was very pleasant, you know. It was good, and it doesn't ask for payment for this, you know. But you know, it's just voluntary donations. Should you feel that you can do that. So I just mentioned that because that might be of use to any of us here in the room. So Michael Chapman must be in his mid-70s, I'd say now, but do well. Yeah, in the book it just mentioned this thing about karma and reincarnation. Well, it's a subject I don't know much about myself, but William Lang, through their conversations with William Lang, he does mention this idea of karma, and he thinks, you know, there are certain problems which, physical problems, suffering, which can be caused by karma. But he says there's a note of warning there that not all problems can be are necessarily karmic problems. So I don't know quite how you make the distinction between the two. But you know, I mean, so you have to be aware that some of the suffering you might be experiencing in this world might be due to your past lives, may not be. I'm not quite sure how you distinguish the two, but it does go into that in the book. And at the bottom of the slide, it said, yeah, so for an example being, if you remember, George Chapman had a daughter who died young, and that, for him, that was the trigger to go into healing. So that, you know, so maybe, you know, these events have a really deep meaning. I don't know. This is quite amusing. It's not just the healing either. Like George Chapman used to call on William Lang for other assistance. So there was as I said in the slide, there's a lady in France who got mugged, and what happened in that case was that William Lang said, well, you know, that's not really my field of expertise, but I'll hand you over to this chap, the spirit called Huey, and he was a very sociable chap, you know, very outgoing, and he took on the case, if you like, in the spirit world, and he came back with the name of one of the youths who did it, their address, I think, the registration number of their car, and they were later apprehended. This was actually in France when this happened. Or maybe where, you know, there's, in the book there's other stories of George finding lost items with the help of William Lang. And another one, you know, releasing earthbound spirits. Okay, and finally, you know, he said he gets lots of requests for people who are in desperate financial straits. You know, they want to win the lottery or whatever, you know. But they'll say, as I say, you know, they'll ask him to do anything at all, really, or whether he does it is another matter, you know. Another point about the William Lang thing, well, I remember it, is that the other difference between William Lang and a lot of healers is that he doesn't promise to heal. What he'll say, I'll do my best, but I won't guarantee anything. There's no guarantees. I mean, it may be that your time is up in the world, and you just have to accept that. But I can ease your passage. You know what I mean? So that, I think that people say that's another thing that distinguishes him from traditional healers, because there are in the stories, very sad stories in the book where, you know, people have really for example, their children have suffered from terribly debilitating conditions, and the parents have gone to many healers, been promised this, that, and the other, and it just hasn't happened, you know, and they're at their wits' end, and then they've gone to Lang, and then finally got some release, you know, something back. So it's a long it seems to me it's a very long trudge trying to find a healer who's suitable. You know, it can be a very long process, you know what I mean? So I thought that's quite interesting. Yeah, that's about my son. Yeah, I'd say within about 4 weeks he was feeling a lot better. And there's some references there, sorry. There are, I don't know if this will work. Let's have if I go to here. Let's skip. I think it's there. Yeah, there's a website. It's michaelchapman.co.uk, and that's Michael's website, and all his contact details are there, and stories about his histories there and everything like that. So should you ever want to contact him, that's the way to do it. As I say, I mean, you can contact him through email, or you could phone him. But he does like letters. It must be, like I say, creates a better connection. Well, that's it from me.